every breakthrough I've had came from overcoming that fear of looking like an idiot in the beginning.
What would you say is a good way to stand out in your writing?
But if you wrote something that said, here's my morning routine, wake up and immediately take a shot of tequila, everyone's going to read that. So just slight ways to add in your personality is really the only way to stand out. There's not that many new ideas that you could potentially come up with.
What's the best way to capture ideas for a beginner?
Yeah, so I've fallen down the rabbit hole of like, I need the perfect productivity system, and the most productive thing I've ever done in my whole life was abandoning all of that.
Do something consistently, even just for 2-3 years, and it's very tough to fail. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to succeed.
No one wants to hear that it's very hard to lose if you do that.
Yeah.
There are very few people who've done that amount of output that haven't seen any success. I'd say there are 0 people. It has literally never been easier to win.
All right, Dickie, welcome to the podcast, man.
What's going on, dude?
Not much. So obviously I've done extensive research, but I kind of want to jump right in. First topic I think is writing. So obviously you started off and you went to Princeton, then you went to BlackRock, you were a hedge fund trader. How did you get into writing online? I think that's just such a crazy journey.
Yeah, I think best place to start would be my freshman English class. Made me never want to write again. And so I studied math at Princeton.
Nice.
Right after that first 2 weeks in that English class, I was like, I don't want to ever do this again. So I basically spent the whole 4 years avoiding writing any class that involved writing papers. And then I got to the real world, graduated, started working at BlackRock, and I immediately realized that the most powerful people at the firm were actually these individuals who were writing these long form emails. They were writing up their thoughts on the market, writing up what they thought was going to happen, etc. And people were reading them every single morning or at the end of the day, every single day. And I recognized some of the investors that I looked up to as well, the Howard Marks, Warren Buffett, etc. They all had this craft of writing. And I realized that I spent 4 years really avoiding it. So I immediately said, I need to learn how to do this. So I started to actually write an internal email and memo and things like that at BlackRock before I even started writing on the internet, and built up like a little newsletter that was, what happened in the market this week? Here's some interesting podcasts, whatever. And that had like 200 people reading it. I've actually never told this story. That had like 200 people reading it. And I then realized I could probably put this on the internet and get a lot more readers than the people I had at the firm.
With.
Exactly. Yeah. And at that point, that was probably September, October 2019. And then January 2020, I started my personal newsletter. And that was the first time I ever published anything on the internet. So it really started as recognizing the power of writing internally. And then I was like, well, if this works internally, it's probably going to work on the internet where there are millions of people rather than just this like 10,000 person firm.
Wow. So that's interesting you say that, because my brain is very math oriented as well. Mm-hmm. Like, was great at math growing up, but writing essays were the absolute worst thing for me. Like mm-hmm. I would start at 1 a.m. and the paper would be due at 6. Like, so you saw this epiphany, right? Where you're like, okay, writing is important. Mm-hmm. And I think now that we're in this online world, I think a lot of people see that. How then did you train yourself, like in the early days, to write? Because it's one thing to know you need to write versus, doing it consistently, getting good at it as mm-hmm. well. So
I was horrible to start, like horrible.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is every breakthrough I've had came from overcoming that fear of looking like an idiot in the beginning. And so my first couple internal newsletters were horrible, and my first couple actual newsletters on the internet were horrible. But I think once you get over 10, 15, 20, I say that no one has 50 shitty reps of anything. They either have 10, 15 and quit, or they keep going long enough to get good.
Interesting.
And so the number of reps is just how you get better at it. And that was it. So I just kept publishing every single week consistently, and you zoom out to 6 months. It's very difficult to stay bad at writing if you write every week for 6 months or every day for 6 months, especially.
Got it. And so you were putting out like a weekly email memo mm-hmm. to the company, and like, what was did you have any like system or process in the early days, or was it just get my info there, proofread it, and then send it out?
Yeah, in the early days, definitely it was like, let's just figure this out. Let's just put things out there. And then I'd ask, and was important overall in terms of improving, at the bottom of every email, both internally and when I started my newsletter, was, hey, could you hit reply and tell me either what you found the most interesting, what you found the most confusing, what you'd like to see me write about next week. And so every single week I was really iterating based on what the people I was sending it to were saying to me. So rather than assume I knew what people wanted to read or that what I was saying was super correct, I was like, hey, I'm kind of just trying to figure this thing out. Could you guys let me know what you think about this? And that feedback loop being much tighter was the easiest way to improve.
Gotcha. So, and I think that's so important that you've realized that early on, because feedback loops, I believe, are so key to anything you do, right? Because that's where you can make the most progress, especially as it's in the early days where it's quantum leaps. And I think that's where people just get stuck in just, trying to solve things on their own and trying to like figure it out on their own versus, again, you get feedback from this person, what do you want to read? What can I do better? Next thing you know, 6 months later, your newsletter is great. So
it's really anything. Any skill you want to learn, it's all about just getting over the fear of looking like an idiot beginner and taking that first rep, second rep. The amount of improvement you can do in the first 20 reps of anything, like you've probably felt this with YouTube or with any kind of creative endeavor. You look back on rep number 1 versus rep number 20, it's always better. But most people will spend years delaying getting started on that first rep just because they know it's going to look bad.
Yeah.
But I've actually reframed that to be a beginner advantage, because in the beginning of whatever you're creating, no one is looking at it. So you're kind of putting up shots in an empty gym. So rather than think about, I have all these eyeballs on me, it's like, oh, there's actually no one looking at me. I can kind of get in reps and improve with a lot less pressure than if I had this huge audience and I had to start. Like if you just started making YouTube and your first video that you put out, you had 100,000 subscribers, you overthink that for years, because it's like, oh, all these people are going to watch this if it's bad, right? Or you say, instead, I have 0. Let's just put something out there and get over that initial inertia and then iterate from there.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And I think especially as you get bigger, you almost want to take less risk, right? And it's ironic because risk is what got you to that initial success in the first place. But again, the fear of judgment, the eyeballs, it's just human nature for us to want to be perfectionists or not want to have any flaws.
Exactly.
So in terms of writing, what would you say is a good way to stand out in your writing?
I think the easiest way to stand out is look at what everyone else is doing and try not to repeat exactly what they're doing. So in Chip 30, we call this the tequila test. And it's, if I were to ask you, write about how to have an effective morning routine, 99% of people are going to say the same things.
Exactly.
Right? It's wake up early, get sunlight, whatever. And you can write about that, but you're just going to look like everyone else when you do it.
Yes.
But if you wrote something that said, here's my morning routine, wake up and immediately take a shot of tequila, everyone's going to read that from a completely different lens of like, wow, okay, I've read 10 things on this that all look the same. This person is completely different. And so obviously you probably don't take a shot of tequila when you wake up, but with anything you're writing, you can ask yourself, what do I think about this topic that's slightly different than everyone else? And how can I almost lead with that? So when someone starts reading it, they're like, oh, this is not just some ChatGPT like list of things.
Some generic thing,
exactly.
Right? I think it's very easy if you start writing and obviously if you're new, it's fine, but you see a lot of the stuff, I'm sure on your tweet page as well, where it all looks like it's coming from just one writer, but like all the pages have that same tone of voice or info.
So just slight ways to add in your personality is really the only way to stand out. Because I think there's not that many new ideas that you could potentially come up with. It's all about figuring out how to say the ideas in 1,000 unique ways through different lenses. But you need to be able to sprinkle in some kind of personality, some kind of unique perspective. And that's what separates you from the average writer.
Yep. Is there any routine you recommend to get in the zone to write?
Mine has varied over the years as I've been in different seasons of both writing while working a full-time job, where I had to write super early in the morning, versus now I have a little bit more time. I can write in the early morning or kind of mid-morning. But to me, it's having a set time of day to write every single day is the easiest way to get in the zone. Because rather than wait until I'm inspired to start writing, it's like, nope, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., 6 days a week. That timer starts And the only rule is I don't get out of the chair during those 2 hours.
Nice.
And most of the time I spend the first 10 minutes like, I don't know. I don't think today's going to be the day. But 10 minutes in, something kind of clicks. But I think where I've definitely learned how to get into the zone is not starting from a blank page, where most of my writing actually happens on long walks. And I'm always taking notes, kind of jotting things down. And by the time I actually sit down to do that 2 hours of writing every single day, I have a huge page of ideas where it's like I'm just grabbing onto one of those and picking up from there rather than 2 hours starting from scratch every single morning. There's no way you're going to be able to write consistently. But if it's I sit down and there's like a half finished sentence and I know I can dive right in, much easier.
Much easier. And so is that your kind of sweet spot, is 2 hours from start to finish?
2 hours, and usually that's about all I can do in one sitting. Sometimes if I'm very inspired, it's like 3 or 4, but I know that 2 hours is going to be like the returns after that are not that high.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do more, I've tried to do less, but like 2 hours, it's really 90-ish minutes, but I give myself a little bit of buffer. And I know that if I put in 90 minutes of writing 6 days a week for years, everything's going to kind of take care of itself.
Got it. So that's your go-to right now, 90 minutes to 2 hours, 6 days a week. And then Sunday, I'm assuming you...
Saturday, I take off. Sunday, I like to wake up and write. That's just always been a habit of mine. But Saturday, I don't plan anything. And ironically, when I leave that super open time, I still want to write on Saturday, but I take that little bit of pressure off where it's like, I'm traveling, whatever. Saturday's usually a day where it's nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Do you have any morning routines or what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, mine's varied again, but I'm always been an early wake up, and that was just from playing football. It was always early morning stuff. So I'm up at 5 doing mobility, a little bit of journaling, and then usually at my desk by 6 trying to get in 2 hours of work. I know that I've kind of won the day at that point, and then a little bit of cardio, sit down from 10 or like cardio stuff from 9 or 8 to 9, just try to get moving, try to get walking. I take a lot of steps and things like that. Work from 10 to 4 usually, and that's like collaborative time, talking with the team, meetings, doing things like this. And then I'll lift it for 4 to 6-ish, eat dinner, and kind of wind down, go to bed like that.
Nice. So mobility first, writing, and then you'll go on a walk. And then you also have gym as well.
Yeah, so I like to kind of separate, and we could go down the rabbit hole of training and that journey, but I like to walk and do or run earlier in the morning and then lift in the afternoon, because that was just how we did it when I played football. It was if you had any kind of cardio-based workout, they got you up and you were doing it in the morning, but if you were doing any kind of strength training, it was in the afternoon, have a couple of meals in you, more effective training I've always found. So that's kind of my breakdown. And by 4 o'clock, I'm usually pretty spent. And rather than just kind of do nothing, I can not recharge, but I'm mentally spent, but I'm not physically. So I can go work out just as hard.
Yep. So I want to learn more about how you get ideas to write. Obviously, I know you said you do 20,000 steps a day, I believe I saw, and then you go on walks daily. Are there any other ways you also get ideas?
My big creative breakthrough is just capturing ideas everywhere. And so I think to come up with ideas to write, you need a lens to put those ideas out there. And so I publish something at least every single day. Right now I'm writing 365 atomic essays, which are part of Ship 30. It's our way of concisely writing a single idea in about 250 words. So I'm putting one of those out every single day this year. Because I have that lens, it turns every single moment into something I could potentially write about. And so I set up a system where I capture those ideas everywhere. So that's a waterproof whiteboard in the shower. That's quick capture on my phone. That's like Post-it notes next to my bed. And so at all times, I'm looking for, is there something I could write about here? And by capturing that, because I have the lens of output, right? If I was only writing something once a month, my creativity would be much, much lower, because there's no like creative desperation almost where I'm always looking for things. So I think the easiest way to come up with ideas is to commit to putting ideas out there consistently. Then everything turns into a potential writing idea.
Yep. And so how do you store all this, right? Obviously you have the Post-its. Do you use like the Notes app on your phone, or what's the best way to capture ideas for a beginner?
Yeah. So I've fallen down the rabbit hole of like, I need the perfect productivity system and the perfect note-taking system and the perfect content calendar. And the most productive thing I've ever done in my whole life was abandoning all of that. Right now, I capture ideas on the Drafts app on my phone, and I have one note that says ideas. And anytime I think of one, I put it in there. And then when I sit down to write, I open that one up and I start writing something long from one of those ideas. And I've fallen down the trap of I can't start until I have the perfect X. But I've always found that progression over perfection with that. So pick something. Whatever it is you're doing now is probably working just fine. Just put ideas on the internet now and then figure the system out later.
Yeah, and I've gone down that rabbit hole too of perfectionism, right? You need like this Notion app, you need this tweet writing app, you need this, right? Then it's like, oh, once I get all of this, now let me start writing. But
it's the ultimate productive procrastination because gathering all those things, designing the perfect blog, working on your writing system that hasn't helped you write at all. So why would it help you write in the future?
Correct.
You know, but
people who want to make their first YouTube video, I need to save up for this fancy camera. I need to set up this studio in my office. I got to wait till I move into a new place to get X, Y, and Z. So
I have a story that I always keep in mind whenever I think about this, and it totally broke my productive procrastination. And so there's two men who are learning to fish, and the first one goes, all right, time to learn to fish. I need to go get the nicest gear. I need to go get a custom fiber rod. I need to go get a fishing coach who's going to teach me every single day. I need to go get 10 books on the topic, and I need to spend the next 6 months getting ready to fish. And then the other guy goes, all right, time to start fishing. He grabs a stick, grabs some rope, throws a hot dog on it, and heads down to the lake. And so day one, he doesn't catch anything. So he iterates. He goes, okay, this part of the lake probably wasn't good. Let me go to this one. And then he gets a nibble. He goes, well, the hot dog didn't work. Now I need to switch the bait. Okay, I got a little, but my stick broke, so now I need a better rod. And so 3 days in, he's made 3 iterations, and he's much better. The other guy has spent 6 months preparing. So by the time he gets ready to fish, he goes down to the lake, and fisherman number one has sucked the entire lake dry. Now he's got an entire fishing business that helps other people start fishing. He's got a restaurant where he prepares it. He's got a chain of restaurants, all because he actually just got started. And I don't know if the story is fully true or not, but I always think to my head, whenever I want to start something, grab a shitty rod and start fishing rather than gathering all this gear, getting ready to fish.
100%. And it's that principle is so key. It's almost, I saw, I actually tweeted about this the other day. It's the simple things that you need to do, but everyone's trying to find the easy things, right? It's, for example, losing weight, eating less than you burn, going to the gym consistently. But
no one wants to hear that, man.
No one wants to hear that. That's not going to sell. They want to hear this new X diet, paleo, the no carb. They want to know, high protein, carnivore diet, whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, this shiny object, if I do this 30-day thing, this 6-month meal plan, maybe I'll lose it, right? Or it's simple, not easy.
No one wants to hear that to write on the internet. Like someone will go, how'd you build a Twitter following to whatever, 300,000? I'm like, well, I've written a tweet every single day for 2.5 years, and I've written a thread at least once a week. And that's it. It's very hard to lose if you do that. Yeah. There are very few people who've done that amount of output that haven't seen any success. I'd say there are 0 people, right? And so how'd you lose all the weight? Like I lost 100 pounds. I burned more than I consumed on an average basis for 5 years. No one wants to hear that that's the answer though. Yes. So they get sold get rich quick schemes or get fit quick schemes, whatever those are.
So how often do you post on Twitter right now? You said every single day.
2 tweets a day, atomic essay every single day, and then I'll write like one longer form, kind of more thought out piece. I think of the individual tweets and the atomic essays as testing ideas. Yeah. And so I'm just throwing things out there, listening to what people say back. And then at the end of every week, I have 25 data points where I can analyze all those and say, which one of these did people find the most interesting or potentially want to learn more about? And that's what I'll expand. So by the time I actually invest like a lot of time writing something, the market's kind of asking for it. And I think that's where a lot of beginners go wrong is they think at the beginning they know exactly what they should write about. Or they think YouTubers think, I know exactly what videos I should make. But they should test those ideas out first and then double down on the ones, right? So it's like risk-free almost. You take a lot of small bets, and then when you have validation, that's when you invest a lot of the time. Exactly.
So tell me more about this atomic essay. What You said it's 250 words.
250 words. And it came from, I was writing on Twitter kind of consistently starting in July 2020. So that's when I made my Twitter account about 2.5, almost 3 years ago now.
Okay.
And I was putting out tweets pretty consistently. And then you had threads, which at the time were still relatively new. There were not that many people writing them, but they were still kind of long. Like they'd end up being a couple, 400 or 500 words. I found that there were a ton of ideas that I really wanted to express and kind of talk about, but I didn't want to put them on a blog. I didn't need to write a thread. So an atomic essay is 250 words and it fits in a single screenshot. So if you look at my Twitter right now, every single day for the last 125 days, I put out one essay that you can read on your phone in one picture, right? So rather than, I think it's a way to stand out on Twitter too, is if you were publishing in this medium, you'll see just the full essay, and it allows you to hit all the basics of writing with a headline and formatting and writing concisely, all that, but much more sustainably than anything long form.
Got it.
So the original atomic essay was like a screenshot of the Notes app, like I was some celebrity making a public apology. But then we started to kind of create some software that helped people write them a little bit more aesthetically. And yeah, that's the foundation of Ship 30 is you write and publish those every single day for 30 days.
Got it.
Much easier than writing 30 blog posts, or you can easily write 250 words a day, right?
Nice. So you do 2 tweets and then you do this basically a screenshot. That's your atomic essay. And then do you do a thread on top of that every single week?
One thread per week as well. So that's kind of my output. I've stuck to that for quite a long time and it hits all the bases, right? I got short form, I got a little bit longer form with the essay, and then one kind of high commitment piece every week that I'm hoping either goes viral or gets picked up, by a good number of people because I've invested more time in it.
Yeah. Do you follow any content strategy principles? Like, for example, Gary Vee pushes start with long form content and then from there it'll give you so many short form ideas. Like, do you start with your thread first every week or not really? You kind of just sit down in your 90-minute, 2-hour block?
It's evolved for sure. I think that right now I'll pick a topic and write a bunch of actually short form on that. So I'll come up with a bunch of ideas that have to do with it. So for example, if I pick kind of like a subtopic of writing and it's like overcoming the struggles that a beginner faces. Well, what are all those struggles? Perfectionism, over editing, procrastination, distractions, where to write, how to come up with like an initial schedule. So I can write like 10 short form pieces answering each of those questions. And those could be tweets, those could be essays. And then the long form, I usually try to err on the side of which one potentially has the largest reach. And so for that, it might be, hey, these are the 10 books that I found were the most helpful in my writing journey. Or here are 10 kind of mindset shifts that help me overcome the initial 6 months of horribly slow, painful growth at the beginning of my journey, right? So that's relatively my structure, but it's not anything super refined.
Yeah. So on that note, actually, what would you say are things that you wish you had known sooner before writing, or even in the early days of writing, now that you've been doing it for a few years, that would have saved you a lot of time?
There's quite a few. So I already talked about one of them, which is reframing the fact that no one's looking at what you're doing is an advantage. So in the beginning, it's like, no one's reading this. Why am I doing it? Flip that. No one's reading this. Great. I can get a lot of reps in early. Second one is thinking in percentages, not in absolutes. So early on, if you have 10 followers and then you go to 20, most people will say, oh, I added 10 followers. Great. But you can easily reframe that and say, I grew by 100%, right? If you get something that gets 100 views and the third one gets 300 views, that's 300%. And so instead of thinking in those small beginner numbers, think in percentage leaps, because that's actually what's compounding. And that was a very helpful reframe for me in the beginning, because I could always be celebrating some kind of big number win. I grew by 1,000% last month. Yeah, it was 10 to 1,000, but it's way bigger than I was hoping for in the beginning. That's two. What else? I think another easy one is you can look at someone who has built up a large following and think that's going to take an extremely long time. But you're comparing your step 1 to their step 9 on something that compounds exponentially. So rather than look what they're doing now. You can go and study what they were doing in the beginning and say, hey, they had to start at zero. Like, go listen to Joe Rogan's first 20 podcast episodes. If you want podcast inspiration, they're horrible. He like had no clue what he's doing, but now he's made 1,300, I don't even know, probably more.
So many.
Exactly. And all of it has improved since the beginning.
Yeah.
Those are three pretty good ones that if I had known in the beginning.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it goes back to that principle you and I were talking about, which is do something consistently, even just for 2-3 years, especially if you're doing it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very tough to fail. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to succeed in some sort of way.
It has literally never been easier to win. If you do anything, like I heard, if you make 21 podcast episodes, you're in the top 1% of podcasts.
I saw that.
So if you just do 21 episodes, you're ahead of 99% of people. It's never been easier.
Yeah.
Never been easier to win. So you can just replace making podcasts with making YouTube, writing tweets, whatever it is. Do something. It's not even 3 years. It's like 6 months at this point.
Yeah.
If you do something consistently for 6 months, it's going to change your life, whatever it is.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to talk about business now. I feel like this is a great topic. I know you have your own YouTube channel, Ship 30 for 30, that you talk about business with your co-founder on. You started out with basically like no followers on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've grown it to 350K now, just from posting for the past 2.5 years. How did you come up with, I guess, your initial product idea from just writing, right? Like, what made you not stick to writing about like finance since you were, in the finance area?
So rewind back to September 2020. So I'd been writing online for 9 months. First 8 months I spent writing on a blog that no one knew existed. My mom was pretty much the only reader. I was literally spending hours slaving over a hot keyboard every Sunday to hit publish to an audience of maybe 5 readers, basically hearing nothing but the internet's crickets of indifference. So I said, okay, this clearly isn't for me. Like, clearly I'm doing something wrong. But rather than quit, I said, okay, I'm instead going to start a Twitter account and start writing there. And instead of writing these weekly blog posts or newsletters, I'm going to write every single day on Twitter. So I went and took a 30-day challenge on my own of writing. It wasn't atomic essays, it was Twitter threads, where I would listen to a podcast in the morning. I would take notes. I'd go to work all day. And then I'd come home in the afternoon and I would write up a thread on what I learned. And I published that. And day 28, I'd written 28 in a row. And day 28, 0 likes, 0 comments, 0 retweets, basically like I was where I started.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. But I said, okay, I'll finish the challenge. I'll get to day 30. And day 29, I wrote a thread that I didn't think was going to go anywhere. And I hit publish. It was like 7 p.m. I turned my phone off. I'm like, this was a fun experiment. Woke up the next day. It went viral. Had like 6,000 or 7,000 likes by the time I looked up. Naval had retweeted it. It was about biology back in the day before biology kind of became more mainstream. I was studying some of the stuff that he was talking about.
Wow.
And so I curated a bunch of it. And soon enough, I was having conversations with people I look up to. They're like, this was awesome. Thanks for doing this. I didn't have any clue he thought this way. It was just cool. It was at that point I realized that it all comes down to just putting something out every single day. You don't know what's going to take off. So 2 weeks later, I tweeted out, hey, I just finished a 30-day writing challenge. Would anyone be interested in doing the next one with me? And the idea would be overcome the friction that you feel of putting something out there. And I, at the time, had like 800, 900 Twitter followers from like 100. So I added like 800 in that month because a couple things went viral after that one because I kind of learned, okay, this works. Let's, back to iteration. And I had like 200 people reply to that. Like, I would love to be a part of this group. I need some accountability. I need help.
Wow.
I can't, whatever. And I was like, look, y'all, I can't teach you anything about this. I don't really know what's going on, but what I do know is how to write consistently for 30 days. So instead of creating a paid thing, I was so terrified to charge money. I was like, money? Me? Like on the internet? No way. And so I made it $50 just because I had to cut out some people. But I said, if you write all 30 days, I'll give you your money back. So I was like, I had a spreadsheet. I'm like calculating things in PayPal, like getting warnings, like, why are you refunding all these people? I'm like, okay, sorry. But created a 30-day accountability channel called Ship 30 back in the day. And that's what it started out in the beginning was join the Slack channel. We're all going to write together and we're all going to keep each other accountable. And that was the original cohort. And the last 2 years, it's been taking that idea and improving it, iterating on it, making it better, making it actually educational. I partnered with Nicholas Cole, who has been writing online since like 2014, to bring his ideas into the educational side. Because again, back to not being a good writer, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew how to build a writing habit.
Yeah.
So that was the original business idea was I don't need to pick something where I'm an expert. Instead, I can just write about something that I am quote unquote an expert in because it's so specific. I'm going to help you build a daily writing habit. That's it.
That's it.
If you want to go learn to write, I'm going to be doing that at the same time, going and studying these other people, but you're coming here for the accountability side. So that was the original Ship 30. And obviously it's grown from there, but that was
nice,
the story.
Man. I need to go back in time and get in that group, look up Dickie Bush a few years ago.
Dude, what's cool about building this whole thing on Twitter is all of those tweets are still there. So nice. I can retweet that randomly and say, like I retweeted the other day. I have a tweet from, I think it's like September, October 2020. It says 100 followers, like hands up emoji. Next stop, 500. And I just retweeted that. And I was like, for anyone who needs to hear this, keep going. And people, because you look at someone who's got a big following, they're like, they must have just gotten there.
Blown up. Yeah.
But if you just track my Twitter from all the way in the beginning, you're going to see all of those little bits of change that have kind of gone to what's going on today.
So you started that. I'm sure obviously you've iterated the product over time.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with Ship 30 for 30? Like, is that something, because I know you have a co-founder,
right.
Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys meet and come up with it together?
Yes.
How did it start?
So the original, it was called Ship 30 in the very beginning. And then he joined. It's funny. We were introduced by the first dollar I ever made on the internet above like first time I ever got paid to write something. I was writing for someone who wanted me to do like a deep dive curation into all of their ideas because that's what I'd become known for on Twitter. And then he put me in touch with Cole. So his name's Nicholas Cole, but his real name's Cole. So it goes by Cole. And it's a cold email that says, not sure why you two should know each other, but I feel like you should. I'll let you take it from here. And legendary email because we got on Zoom and just started jamming. We're like, oh yeah, you're right. Like we kind of became friends. And then I started reading his book, The Art and Business of Online Writing. And it was exactly what I needed to take the next level as a writer myself. I had built a habit. I needed to go learn the game. And then he joined the January 2021 cohort, which was the first one I ever charged money for. Wow. It was $150. And he hit publish on an atomic essay for the first time and goes, dude, this is awesome. We should partner up and do something with this. And I was like, yes, we should. And so from every cohort since then, we've been 50-50, building everything together, basically taking all of his ideas, because he started writing on the internet in 2015. Like he had one of the most read writers on Quora, Inc., all those different publications. He's got millions of views across all of them. And obviously, I think he's written the best book on the topic. And Ship 30 has been basically taking his ideas, packaging them up so people now join. They build the writing habit, but over those 30 days, they actually go and put those ideas into practice. So we have live sessions where we teach together. And the last 2.5 years has been improve the product, slightly raise the price. Improve the product, slightly raise the price. And we just continue to do that. We're at a point now where very little needs to change, and we know it solves a very specific problem. It's, you should be writing on the internet. You have tried and you haven't done it consistently. Why? Because you probably didn't see any success. You didn't have people surrounding you that could help. This is for you. And now we're at a point where that's fully fleshed out and kind of thinking about what we can do on top of that.
Wow. And you've had 7,000 students go through Ship 30?
Yeah, 7,000.
That's a lot. That's crazy.
A lot of fun. And
congrats.
I think that our goal is to get to 1 million. So if we can help 1 million people start writing on the internet or build the foundation to build to earn a living writing on the internet, because that's where eventually I think this all goes, is you start writing and you go, oh, wow, I understand the power of the internet now. There are things I can do. There's education I can create. There are people I can meet. And it's not just doing it for the sake of it. It's eventually to build a business built around your writing. So that's kind of the next step we help people take is how do I go and do that?
Yep. So I know you're building another course and product right now. That's the big one you're working on, your high ticket product. Tell me more about that. Well, how does that how is that different from what you currently offer?
So the higher ticket is called the Premium Ghostwriting Academy. So Nicholas Cole built an entire business around ghostwriting for CEOs, authors, musicians, and I think has more knowledge about the craft of ghostwriting than anyone else in the world. And so as people have started to build these organic followings on Twitter, LinkedIn, other writing platforms, we found that they initially start creating a lot of the content themselves. And they're probably still good at that. But if they want to go and build a business, you can't spend all day writing while also building the business too. So we want to teach people who are good writers and may not necessarily want to build the business themselves, go out to these other creators and say, hey, I can either help you create educational assets like email courses, I can help you start newsletters, I can take over your Twitter content, your LinkedIn content. And that's such a prime market because anyone who is either creating on YouTube or like a video platform or on Twitter, LinkedIn, they have so much content now that they're really not saying anything new. They're kind of just repackaging and repurposing their core ideas. And so you can have someone step in and say, hey, I've gone and consumed everything you've ever put out. I can write just like you in a new way. And so we want to help people build their own one-person business around doing that for other people. So it's a hyper-specific skill to be able to write in someone else's voice, to curate things in a way that that person would find like they're okay to publish. So we started a coaching program that helps people become premium ghostwriters versus a freelance writer who's selling like getting paid per word or getting paid per hour. So they're basically trapped and they can never scale their income versus a premium ghostwriter who creates assets for someone. So an email course, a newsletter, and you get paid per asset you create, which you can then create a process around, scale your income and do that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I guess tell me how that process has been, because I think, you went from basically content creation, being a creator, to now building your business. Right. And so now I'm sure you're going down the rabbit hole of learning business skills. What's that process like? Where are you at right now in that?
So Ship 30 got to a couple million just on the back of like, we sell one product to one person on one channel. Twitter, it was showing the course, and that was it. Now, there are a lot of different skills that go into running something higher ticket, right? It's sales, it's more fulfillment, hiring, delegation, things like that. So it's an entire new game that I have to go and learn. But this goes back to the beginning of like, rather than in the early days be like, I need to go read all these sales books and read all these hiring books. No, it's like, I think about it as just in time versus just in case learning. So learning something just in time is, hey, I'm building something actively. I find a new bottleneck to preventing that next level of growth. I need to go remove that. And so right now I need to learn the skill of hiring and attracting high level talent to fulfill. So we're not the ones doing all the sales calls, all the fulfillment calls, and creating all the content.
Yeah.
And that's been a fun process because I have something to apply it to. I go and I read a book. I'm not reading the whole book. I'm reading one chapter to remove this one like little skill gap that I have. I solve that and then I keep going. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's really just following the right people on the internet, joining different groups and communicating with people like you who've done it in different areas and saying, hey, what am I doing that's just completely wrong right now? It's this idea that Alex Hormozy talks about of finding the ideal scene, where anytime you're kind of starting a new business or starting in any kind of new venture, you have no clue what the right thing looks like. So I spend a lot of time just trying to find ways to talk to people saying, here's what I'm doing. Where am I just totally wrong? Like, here's how I'm thinking about interviewing and hiring. Where am I just an idiot? Can you tell me? Because all I'm trying to do is pay down that ignorance tax of not knowing exactly what I should be doing.
Yep. Exactly. And it's what you said. It's a constant iterative process with business, right? You test something, you learn something, go apply it, and you go back. But I think where you can really expedite that flywheel is from learning from people who have done it.
Yes.
Like all of the biggest jumps I've had in my business were from basically learning from someone who's done it, who's gone through those months of mistakes, who have lost tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing the wrong things. And then you, as long as you listen and it's from a credible source, you'll jump past that step.
And I think it's something to do with maybe the way our brains are set up. With as analytical thinkers, I'm not necessarily like a create the vision from the ground up where I can see all these different pieces. Where I think my greatest skill is when I see a roadmap or I see someone else doing something well, I can execute that roadmap efficiently and faster than other people. So, like for an example, if we're hiring a sales team for our Ghostwriting Academy, if I was left to do that on my own, I don't think I have the creative, like, oh, this is how I would go and do it. I need to go see how other people have done that. And then I'm just faster at getting up to speed on that. And I think for a while, I almost fought that of like, oh, I need to be able to do this myself. I need to be able to come up with this. Like, I need to be creative with it. But rather it's recognize that that's not my skill set. Here's what is. How can I maximize that?
Nice. And that's so good that you realize this now, especially as you're launching this next product, because that's something that took me a while to realize. And there's a concept on this. It's in the book Rocket Fuel. It's called the visionary versus the integrator. And so they're two very key parts in a business, because the visionary is a person that's great at ideas. They're great at seeing the big picture. They're great at, strategy, creative. But where they lack is execution. They lack on people management side. They lack on, organization, follow through. And that's where the integrator comes in, which is basically like the COO, however you want to call it. But they're great at people. They're great at upholding the culture. They're great at managing the day-to-day. They're great at execution. And so I think it's I don't know how I was able to get this started in the beginning, because I was playing both roles,
Right.
And it's so brutal because my natural strength is more on the visionary side, where if I just map out the vision or the game plan for someone for the quarter, there's so many people who are way better than me at executing. And so
how'd you go about finding integrators?
yeah, so this one, that's probably the hardest hire to make in a company. I was pretty lucky because my person saw a YouTube ad that we had and reached out to me on LinkedIn, and they basically fit the criteria. So this was before I was even looking for someone, but I was like, okay, this is very interesting. And so we honestly kind of lucked out then, but I'm sure, standard recruiting process, your network, but you're essentially looking for someone who's very operational, who's great at all of these integrator skills.
And so your company has 35 employees right now?
I think we're at 41 today.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Dude, that's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot.
I think we're at like 6.
Yeah.
Huh.
But it's but again, it's what's interesting too is I have a lot of friends in tech and SaaS who have raised a lot of money too.
Huge teams,
but all of the issues, regardless if you're in online education, you're in the venture world with SaaS, whatever it is, you go through the same scaling issues regardless. Like I help my friends all the time who have raised a lot of money, but it's interesting because they went through the exact same issues I went through, whether it's hiring or people or finding the right people. So like whether or not, doesn't matter what business model you have, you're going to need that visionary integrator combo. And that's where things will take off.
And you've never raised money, right?
Yeah. We've
fully
never raised money.
bootstrapped?
Yeah. Fully
Yeah.
bootstrapped.
I don't see myself ever wanting to raise a venture round or anything like that. I think all that does is kind of, and maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's a false belief, but it just looks like you're almost hiring a boss again. It's like you escape to start your own thing and then you just hire someone who's like, hey, you have to do this on this timeline, and if you don't grow by this rate, but I know some people love that game. I think I left my full-time job so I didn't have to listen to someone else. So the idea of going and finding someone else to listen to doesn't sound good.
I think it just does come down to the business model. Like the space we're in is amazing for not venture, right? Like the online education space is made for cash flow and basically your own control. When you start, let's say SaaS, the initial upfront costs are so high to maintain and hire engineers, and so that's why you have to basically bootstrap, or you have to go VC backed.
Yeah, I've felt that because we have a SaaS company where people who join Ship 30, it's called TypeShare, and that's where you do and publish your atomic essays. And it sounds great starting a SaaS company, but you realize that I think is the highest skill set requirement to build. You have to have customer support. You have to have relatively solid engineering, design, hiring, operations, everything.
Yes.
And there's a reason why people raise money for that is what we've clicked on. Is like, oh, this is a lot harder. Like, yeah, you can get something that people start using, but to keep users, it's so hard. Like churn numbers.
So that's with you and Cole. You guys have TypeShare?
Yeah, we have one other third co-founder on that who came to us with the idea. So it was like third with that.
I'm assuming he's the technical
exactly
co-founder.
Right. Okay. So I did study computer science in college, but I haven't coded in multiple years. But ChatGPT has kind of turned me back into that a little bit because I know the basics and the fundamentals. I just am a little bit rusty. I can get back in and say, hey, I need this module built. And
that's good.
I mean, I can't imagine being in college right now with like some of the coding, all of those things. Crazy. I think the amount of leverage that you can create when you have, I think the skill set of engineering and writing right now with these tools, that if you have those two skills, you really know how to think. And then you have been the one executing that thinking, the engineering and the writing itself. Yep. But if you know what you want, we're only like 6 months away from basically being able to snap your fingers and create anything. And so it all comes down to like, what is it that you're creating?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a crazy world is as engineering starts to become less and less reliant, because over the past decade, right, engineers were the hottest, most sought after role. But as AI continues to grow and even engineers will start to get replaced too. That's just something crazy to think about.
I think it's replaced, but it's also, if they know how to think, all AI is going to do is increase the power law of every single field, where the top 1% of engineers are going to be able to use AI 100 times better than everyone else. And so they're going to leap far ahead. Yep. The best writers are going to understand how to use AI better than everyone else. And so they're going to leap ahead. I think all it does is create a wider gap in skill rather than replace anyone. So maybe it will quote unquote replace the ones below, but I don't even think it's that. I think it's just a skill magnifier. I think about it as a positive sum thing where it's everyone, the piece of the size of the pie is going to grow because of AI. You just want to be the one who's helping grow it.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, which I agree with you there, which is I believe the number one skill in the next 10, 20, 30 years is who can be the best thinker, right? Yes. Working on that critical thinking skill now, because if you can do that, you can leverage all of these tools to build whatever you want.
Right. And that's the hardest skill to develop.
Yes.
Like Warren Buffett makes 2 decisions a year.
Yeah.
And those are billion-dollar decisions. Everyone at the end of the day is going to have all the leverage that they could possibly need to make those big decisions. And so that's what we'll get graded on. Like everyone who sees the most success will just be the best thinker, like you said.
You know what's interesting that I thought about? So now, like my hours have gone down quite a good amount in the business. And I'm still working a lot, but I'm not in terms of like me physically doing something. I'm working a lot, but my time doesn't have to be at my computer. It could be me going for a walk. It could be me doing this podcast, learning something about, let's say we talk about content strategy. It might be a big 10x needle mover for our content team. It might be me getting on a phone call or Zoom call with another business owner. And it goes back to your principle of doing less, but doing more of the things that have that huge payoff, right? Because last year I was working a lot, and the business did, it didn't do that much better, if not, like it basically stayed the same from the previous year. It stayed pretty stagnant. But this year, as I entered in, I'm doing less, but the business has compounded significantly more already since last year. And it's because I'm only focusing on the right things and I'm ignoring everything else. That's not that big payoff.
It's uncomfortable though, isn't it? Where what got you here was those 12-hour days sitting in front of the computer, grinding, doing the work, creating the things, creating the ads, creating the content.
Yes.
And now you're zooming out and you're seeing that that's the right choice, but it doesn't feel like it.
Correct.
Like if you have a full day where it's like everyone that I'm working with spent all day working and all I did was think on like 2 things and go for a long walk, I feel like I could be doing more.
Yes. I think I didn't do anything for the day.
But I think that's like the huge skill to develop is getting comfortable not doing, but execute, like orchestrating.
Yes.
Right? The orchestra conductor is not the one playing every instrument, and so it might not look like they're doing anything, but they're the reason that that orchestra sounds so good.
Yep.
And I've always felt uncomfortable zooming out from playing the violin super hard to that orchestration mode. But I think that's the level of leverage that you have to keep ascending.
100%. And it's almost like, man, like my team's working so hard, but you don't see the head coach of the Lakers jumping in when they're down by 20.
Right.
Right. Like
Exactly.
there's not. So
it's not easy though.
It's not easy.
I still struggle with that. I think that all the time it's like, how can I make sure that they feel like I'm working almost,
Yes.
right? But I think it's not that. It's supporting them and saying, hey, you're doing a great job. It's, hey, here's how you could be doing this better,
leverage
right?
your resources, leverage mentorship.
Yes.
You know,
Mhm.
helping allocate capital in the company to get them software so they're more
Yes.
organized or whatever it is. But
You were a resource allocator. Like
Yes.
that's the highest level of leverage is just keep zooming out and saying, how can I just make sure that every piece of leverage I have within the company right now, whether that's people, money, time, or content, whatever, is just going in the right places. That's kind of your job as you keep leveling up.
100%. And I think the other tough skill to develop as well is saying no, right? Because there's so many things. I'm sure you're feeling this right now. There are so many things you can be doing. And I'm sure you're trying to balance it right now with Ship 30,
Yes.
with software, now with the high ticket course. It's I'm sure even for you, it's like, man, like what can I be doing now to move faster, to get this done faster? But
And especially because our growth has been relatively quick, where my original goal with Ship 30 was to make $10,000 in a year.
wow.
I said, if I could make $10,000 this year, that's almost $1,000 a month. That's like half my rent. Holy shit. I'd be on top of the world. I'd be king. And so I always say that growth is having problems today that you would have begged to have had years ago. And growth is also saying no to opportunities today that you would have done anything to have had years ago. So I see something where it's like, hey, you can make an extra $20K a month doing this. And my 2.5 year ago brain goes, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But like, we're doing 400, 500K a month right now. So the opportunities that you have to say no to are huge. And only growing as well.
Yes.
Right. So not only does the skill of saying no, it's important in the beginning, but it only gets harder because the opportunities that you're saying no to are so much bigger as you grow. So that's not a skill that you necessarily get better at because the game just gets harder. It's like you have to say no to something that could add 100K a month in revenue, but would take a year of effort because you could reallocate that to something that makes 200, 300.
Yes.
And that skill, again, it's always, it's funny to think about some of the entrepreneurial skills that don't get any easier because the game just gets harder.
Yes.
And I think we just talked about one of them, which was orchestrating.
Yes.
And then another is saying no, right?
100%.
Those don't ever get easier. You just find new ways you just level up, and then there's a new level that's a lot harder to get you to the next one.
Yes. And it just goes so much against human nature, right? That's where I think it gets tricky because it just does. So one thing I'm thinking about this quarter, and this is probably, I sat down the other day and I was like, what is the one decision I can make this quarter that will dictate if this is, a 25 or $50 million company in the next 2 years, right? A year, in revenue. And that one decision right now for me, so we just launched another trading education company. So we have 2 now, and that one we're going to scale this year.
Cool.
And we want to get to a 3rd funnel as well. So ideally we start writing it and strategizing it sometime in Q3, launch in Q4. By then, the 2nd funnel will be on its way, ramped up and scaled by end of year. We'll continue scaling that into next year, but at least we'll go into next year with the 3rd, funnel and product and online education company. And the tricky thing here is, depending on what that offer and product or idea is, in 2 years from now, it could be a $10 million a year company.
Yeah.
or it could be a 30, 40, $50 million a year company from the same amount of work that we have to do in the next 2 years, right? So it's basically one decision that can be the difference between 10 versus 30 or $40 million a year from that one product alone.
Can we workshop what you're thinking through
100%.
a little bit? Because that sounds like a really cool decision-making framework to think through. So what are you thinking could be the difference between 10 and 50? Is it the vehicle that you scale it with, or is it the offer, what you actually help people do? What are you thinking about?
100%. I think really the vehicle for us right now in terms of like how we generate leads, how we close leads and acquire clients, I think that's pretty systemized for us. Although don't get me wrong, I'm sure that maybe the marketing or sales, if it's some crazy new marketing strategy, that could 2 or 3x us. But I do believe most of it comes down to the offer, right? So like for you guys, it's becoming a ghostwriter, right? But for us, what is going to be hot in the next 2 years? Or like, can I hop on early in a trend, right? Because I'm sure you've seen it. There's so many Amazon FBAs, e-commerce, drop shipping, even trading. You know, that's how I got my start into this online world. Even trading, you know, there's a lot of online trading education companies out there. So what is the next hot online education thing where people can make a lot of money and make, you know, at least 10K a month online, remote, doing it how they want, right? So there's a few options I'm thinking about, right? And so there's another one that's big that a lot of people push, which is like how to become a closer, right? Learn how to sell on the phones. We have people in our company making 15 plus K a month on the phones, right? And before then, some people even had no experience. They just took an online sales high ticket course, came to us. We saw they had talent. Boom, now they're doing 15K a month.
Right.
So that's one option because we know how to train people from scratch in terms of how to be a high ticket closer. There's, you know, we could also just stay in our lane and do trading, but find something and really take trading to the next level, right? And so, for example, I do believe there will be another big crypto boom, right? And so if that's my hypothesis, and I believe that crypto is the market where everyone's and their mom and their grandmas is going to want to hop in next, right? And
Halvening's coming up, what, a year and a month? A year in 2024, right?
Yeah. Yes. So
things could be lining up very interestingly from a macro perspective around that time.
So the next bull market, like I do believe crypto is going to go on a tear again, right? If that's the case, we don't have a crypto trading education
You
product.
don't? Really?
We don't.
So you're all stocks?
We're stocks and options. That's our first brand, Stock Navigators. And our second brand we just launched is purely futures.
Okay. So broad, commods, gold, everything?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Taking me back to my world, man.
Exactly.
That's what I was a macro trader.
Nice.
So it's all central banks, interest rate futures, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. You know, right? So we specialize futures there, but we're missing crypto. That could be a huge one, right? Another thing as well that I thought about is doing more of a B2B offer because B2B allows us to charge way more. And, you know, instead of charging $6,800, $7,800 for a product, we can charge 20, 25, 30K and have a back end that's a lot more. Obviously, it's going to be more hands-on fulfillment on our end. But again, anyone who needs help servicing in this B2B online education space, we know how to do it. We've done it, you know, from zero bootstrap to $1 million a month. So
a lot of different choices there, different markets.
So
my initial gut is which of those three could you do with almost the same team you have right now? It sounds like the crypto education one.
Correct.
If you don't have that vertical, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that that's going to continue to accelerate, but how potentially could you do it in a way that's different than everyone else, right? Crypto trading, but with what lens, with what, you know,
why is crypto trading with us going to be different from other people teaching crypto trading? So
I don't think there's a perfect answer.
Yeah, it's not. It's just the one decision I got to get right this quarter. So.
Another one I've been thinking about in terms of waves, I think there's going to be a job of a freelance prompt writer in the future, where all your only job is going to be going to businesses or individuals and saying, hey, I analyzed your business. I think I could write these 10 ChatGPT prompts that would greatly accelerate what you're doing. And they get paid like per prompt. And I think that's an interesting educational opportunity is how can you teach people how to prompt? And then when I think about these B2B and B2C offers, I try to think about how could you create talent in one area, and that's the B2C side. And then how could you also create demand for that talent and fulfill from the same group of people, right? So in this example, I'm kind of thinking through, if you had a B2B, hey, we help you find and scale a prompt writing team. And then you had a B2C that was, hey,
let me help you become a prompt.
Exactly, right? Yes. So you have a higher ticket, you have still a high ticket, but B2C, and then you had that kind of synergy, right? Because you're working in the same thing. It's not chasing a shiny object. I think we talked about Cole Gordon, who's done a great job with that. He's got a program that helps people become sales reps and then helps B2B. Online businesses find sales reps, right? So very synergistic across the company.
Yes.
And I think he's crushed it with that. So I'm thinking on the ghostwriting side, we could be doing this too.
Yes.
We help people find ghostwriters and we help people become them. And if you can put those two together and then figure out that model, you can then apply that model. And that's the whole level of leverage thing, right? You really just need to nail one operational structure, and then you, as the CEO, zoom out and then put yourself here. And it's like this kind of structure, same structure, just different topic, different market. Same structure. And then you're able to oversee all of that. And that's kind of the fun way of thinking. The skill isn't that different from actually executing it and executing 10 of them. The only difference is you have you running each of them.
Yes.
And then you zoom out. So that's where my head goes of how do you get to a $100 million education company? It's building $10 million education companies.
Exactly.
Right. And they all fulfill and operate the same way.
Exactly. So that's what took us the longest time to build. We have an amazing team right now. Everyone works very hard. We are very smart people in different lanes. But like what you said, the hardest thing is finding really good people. And even if you found someone really good, sometimes you might have to train them. They might not be the perfect fit yet, or they might not be ready to manage a team, right? And so that's been our past 18 months or even 2 years, I'd say, is really doing that. And I think just now are we starting to feel the effects of it, because I thought we would be scaling 18 months ago to get to this point. And it took a little longer than expected. But once you have that, that's when you can really zoom out and be like, okay, what's the next big thing to focus on? Because everyone in your company is aligned. You have your core focus, your core values, you understand the vision and mission, and now everyone's rowing in the same direction. And that's when things start to really move.
And I overlooked so much of that, the vision, the mission, the values. One thing I found, and I know you've started to do some more organic, is the easiest way to attract talent is to have a high quality organic content brand, because people see what you're talking about and they want to work for you. And so we've started to just set up, we think there's probably 6 or 8 hires that we're probably going to want to make over the next 2 years to kind of get to where we want to go. We're not ready to make those yet, but we put up initial landing page job posts for all of those and occasionally drive traffic to them. Because I think this idea of stacking the bench is important, where you should always be having potential people who want to work for you, so that when you want to hire for that position, it's not because by the time you want to hire for it, it's too late if you're just starting.
Yes.
And so we've clicked on that recently. It's here are the 6 things. Let's go learn the skill of what it looks like to hire them. Set up those quote unquote funnels. They're the same thing as acquiring clients. You're acquiring potential people to work with you. You need an offer, a landing page. You got to drive traffic to it. It's all kind of the same thing. It's just you're not necessarily selling anything except selling them on why they should work for you. So that's been fun to learn. And I just recently started posting on Instagram. Never posted it since college. And there's people who I'll link to our podcast who've never heard of us, but we just talk a little bit of business on the podcast and go, hey, are you guys hiring? I like what you're doing. And that's been that's a different reach out that I had never experienced, because when you're not talking about your business at all, you're just educating, you're not really attracting people to come work for you. But when you just start to talk about your mission, your vision, your values, how you think about scaling, how you think about where you're going, people want to latch onto that a little bit.
Yeah.
And so as you, like I was going on your YouTube, I think if you talked about where you're headed, right, more and more people are just going to be like, that sounds like something I want to be a part of.
Yeah. And going back to what you're talking about in terms of social media, I genuinely believe, and this just happened. So I was looking to hire a personal assistant. And I posted on my story last week, hiring a personal assistant in person in Miami. Within, I don't know, the first 6 hours, 20 applicants.
Dude, okay. Can you send a couple
my way? I can actually send you a couple my way because I know you mentioned it earlier. Yeah. So I'll check my Instagram after and send some. But I was just like, wow. Like, and then boom, I looked through the list. I knew even some of them, we had mutual friends. I called mutual friends for reference checks, you name it.
Right.
And then, I hired someone basically within a few days, just like that.
Damn.
And so it's, and I think, like, I can't even imagine people who have 100K plus followers on Instagram or certain platforms. You post it instant.
Because it's the network effect too. It's, hey, you might not, of those 100,000 people, your job applicants might not be looking at the story, but they know people who would be interested in that job.
Yes.
So it's like, hey, I just send it to them and then they apply through there. It's a huge unlock that I didn't think was a thing, but I've started to see it now.
Crazy, right? Or even my COO saw a YouTube ad, right? Like it's being online. If you're not online, I genuinely believe you're at a disadvantage in today's day and age. So
you have something in your hand that can reach the entire world. Like, we're going to look back on this 40-year stretch of, like, if you weren't latching onto that wave, what were you doing?
So how is your balance right now? Like, how are you balancing business and just social life and things? Obviously, I'm sure you're grinding quite a good amount.
I think it's untraining, again, what got me here. So I left BlackRock in March of 22. So I just hit my 1 year kind of entrepreneurial anniversary.
Wow.
In a sense. And I definitely spent the last year completely tilted in the, hey, I left, I'm going to grow this thing. And it did. It tripled last year from 21. So 21, 22, 300%. We're trying to triple it again this year. Yeah. So I've definitely still been in a season of, hey, that extra social thing that I could go do, probably better allocated here. Not necessarily that I would spend time working, but it would take away from getting up the next day and being able to execute. Like, I've experimented now. I've gone 15, 16 months without alcohol. And that was just a one decision that I knew would prevent any kind of loss of momentum, right? So I could still go do those social things, wake up the next day and still be kind of humming, rather than you lose a day here, you lose a day there, and then you're just kind of in that negative spiral. So it's really been the last year and a half of pure focus on my health, pure focus on the business. And so as I've started to see kind of the path forward of the business, I've started to reevaluate, what does that balance look like? I think for the next 6 months, staying where I'm at, continuing to do the same thing, but I want to do some travel this summer. I picked up a hobby. I've started DJing. I've always wanted to be able to mix music just for a little bit of fun. And I want to go to Europe for a month this summer, play music there, explore, kind of check things out. So that's where I think I'm going to find balance, is just getting off the grid for a month and then coming back and having pieces in place that allow me to do that. But balance right now is very heavily tilted, and I'm okay with that. It's extending the time horizon and saying there are going to be times of a lot more social in my life. I'm very confident of that. But is that now, or is it in 2 years? And being okay with it being later is something I've kind of settled on.
Yep. Got it. Yeah. And I think, especially in this game of business where you're constantly go, you have to know what recharges you outside of business, because that's one thing I see so much is people burn out or they give up, they quit, whatever it may be. And it's because, you obviously need a push, especially in the early days, and you grind hard, but don't underestimate the value of that recharge time, because that's how you keep going, right?
Exactly.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's good that you know that.
Luckily here in Miami, it's very easy to recharge. I put my phone on airplane mode. I come out over to South Beach here and I just spend the day in the sun forgetting what the internet is.
Yes.
And then I go home, I eat a good dinner, I fall asleep, wake up Sunday, and it's like, I'm ready to go.
Yes.
You know? And I can't imagine living in the cold or somewhere else right now like, how do you recharge if you just have to sit inside all day?
Well, we used to live in New York, right? You said you lived there too. So
horrible.
Yeah.
Like, luckily, New York right now, April, May is like the nice time. So anyone listening to this or whenever it comes out, you're probably in the good part of New York.
Yes.
But like, dude,
the winter is brutal in New
waking
York.
up at 5 a.m. to a screeching alarm, going to work in the dark, working under fluorescent lights for 12 hours, leaving, going and getting like a late lunch at 3:34 and it being dark, and then going back to my desk till like 7:38 and going home 8:39 in the dark again. Some of the saddest months ever. And so I'm very glad I put in the work to get out of that.
Yeah.
But that's a tough life.
That's a tough life.
It's a lot of darkness, a lot of no sun versus here. It's like sunrise is 6:50, sunsets like 8. I could sit outside all day and work if I wanted to, and I do that a good number of days.
Yep.
So yeah, much easier to recharge here.
100%. And I think it serves as just a good motivation for anyone listening too. Like, it can get better. You just got to be consistent, chase that first thing, and really go all in for it. So
it was a realization in that late 2019 period, which we talked about in the beginning, of like, I knew that I wasn't going to stay at BlackRock forever, but I didn't just quit. I didn't just stop right away. It was, how can I start to plant seeds that are going to bring me opportunities that I could potentially pursue in the future? And for me, that was just putting ideas out on the internet.
Yeah.
That was the easiest way, lowest friction way of like, hey, I'm just going to kind of explore some interesting topics. But 2021 was like the ultimate grind period. I was working, I'd be on calls for work, doing regular market stuff from like 7:30 a.m. to like 5:30. Luckily, I was working from home, so I could get up and there would be breaks in the middle of the day, but like up at 4:30, writing and building stuff till 7, then switching over to BlackRock time, finishing, eating dinner, and then from like 6 to 9, 10, back to building stuff. And I look back on that as like a very pivotal year, and I think that's put me in a place now where I can make different choices. But I think you will always have that 1 year at least of pure grind. And I don't think there's any way to have success without that. Like, I look at people who are like, you got to be careful about burning out. Got to be careful. I'm like, yeah, but most people are doing way less than would actually take to burn out. And you need to push that limit a little bit. Most people won't agree with that, but I think until you find that limit and actually do burn out for a little bit, and then you can kind of tilt back, I'd way rather push the envelope, find it, scale back by 10%. And that's what I did. So that's what worked for me. I don't think it'll work for everyone, but
I think for me, I didn't take a vacation at all or a day off until like 3.5 years into my business. So the early day grind, I think is it's brutal, but it's what builds character. And I do believe like that's where life really tests you to see like how bad you want it. So,
and I relish that time, man. I look back on that. Like, I have journals throughout that entire period of like, another day, here's the game plan of the whole day. And I look back on that, I'm like, dude, what you're doing now is so much easier than what you were doing then.
Yes.
Like, anytime I feel stressed, I zoom back and say, what I'm doing today, that person who was putting in 15-hour days had no clue that things were eventually going to be able to work, but they were just heads down hoping that it would do anything to be where I'm at right now. So I found myself in like a 24-hour funk here now where I'm like thinking through a lot of things, and I just zoom back to that kid sitting in his apartment at 22, like, what the heck am I going to do for the next 5 years, 10, 20 years if I'm stuck here? And what I get to do now is just an absolute walk in the park compared to that.
Yeah, and I think this should serve as just like such great motivation. If anyone listening, if you're in your early 20s, you're not going to know what it looks like in 5 years. Everything only looks clear when you connect the dots in hindsight. But just know 22, 23, for me, first company failed after college. Basically put in like all of my savings to start it. So 22, 23, basically last year, all my friends working 6 figures a year on Wall Street, and moved home with my parents, and continue to trade every single day. all the money I made from trading, put it back into my business, lived at home, saved money. And it just, and you look back 4 years, you're like, wow, time flies, and you figured it out. Right now I'm in Miami and all of this, but it's you just got to keep going. You got to put in the time. You need to build those battle scars.
It's so true.
So,
and you won't know like you said, you won't know what it looks like. You just have to guess.
Yeah.
And say, is it, I love this quote from Alex Hormozy of, is it unreasonable if I do these things for the next 2 years to see success? And so I like to reflect all the time on the actions I took today and this week. If I repeated those actions every week for the next 5 years, where would I end up? And is that where I want to be? Because that's really all you're going to be in 5 years. Is going to be a projection of what you're doing today.
Yep.
And that's different than what I was doing in the past. But that reflection always helps me after kind of a tough day, or on a really good day. I'll do that same thing of like, I just got to keep doing what I did today for a long time. The rest becomes inevitable.
How did you, I guess, what was the big mindset shift for you that allowed you to take action? Because I think a lot of people were in your same shoes or are in your same shoes right now, right? They're at some job they don't enjoy, right? It feels like they wake up and they're just stuck. They're stuck in the hamster wheel. And people know that waking up every day and going to work is not going to get them to where they need to be, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. And so they're in their heads. And what that causes is it causes inaction. And then 5-10 years down the line, now it's in people's minds, it's too late to do anything, right? That's what they've convinced themselves.
I got 2 frameworks for you. The first one's a story of how I was eventually motivated enough to take action on something. And it was about 1.5 years into working at BlackRock. And this was my dream job, granted. Like, I went to school, I studied math, I said, I want to be a hedge fund trader. And so I did enjoy what I did that entire time. I just knew that where I would end up in 10 years wasn't where I wanted to be, because I saw someone on my floor, probably in his mid-30s, late 30s, ask his boss for permission to go to his son's Little League game, and his boss said no. And I saw that. And I fast forwarded to myself as a father, where the most important thing is going to be creating an awesome life for my children. And seeing that and thinking, am I doing all this work only to get to there? I remember going home and like freaking out, because this was the dream job. I checked every box. I got great grades. I played sports. I did everything. And it's like, that got me to here, and that might get me to there. Uh-oh. So that was what struck me into action, was not necessarily that my current situation was not where I want to be, but it was projecting out, staying on this current path and where I would end up, and having the confidence of like, that is not where I need to be. That means I need to make a change and a pivot today. From there, how you actually go about taking action, I like this idea of killing your onces. So everyone has a once in their life. Once I stop this job, then I'll do it. Once work slows down, once my kid gets from 2 to 4, once I break up with my girlfriend, like whatever it is, everyone has onces that they think, on the other side of that, I'll start doing something. But those onces never go away. So anytime I hear myself saying, once this, then I'll do it, I just immediately start doing that thing. Because I know that once that thing that I think is actually holding me back ends, I'll just have a new once. And so you just have to build that into the way you operate of like, I hear a once, I just get started. Yep. And so it's never going to be the perfect time to start anything. And if you sit around waiting for that, that's what happens is 5, 10, 15, 20 years go by, and those onces never went away. And then you look back of like, did any of those matter? No, I should have just started back then.
And I think it's also, as much as I would love to tell people, hey, you need to be more self-aware, being self-aware is such a tough skill, right? And it's something I believe everyone should work towards, to becoming more self-aware consistently. But that's where I believe having the right environment is so important. So for me, one of my wants is, I used to talk about YouTube a lot. I'd say, once my business gets here, once it hits this, or once it's more stable, I'll start YouTube. And I remember one of my good friends Forbes, who lives in LA, he basically was like, dude, you've been telling me for the past 2 years you're starting a YouTube channel, and now we were planning our 2021 goals together. He's like, and now you're telling me again, or I think it was 2020 goals. I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
He was basically telling me, now you're telling me again, you're gonna delay it 6 months or another year. And he's like, that's not allowed. You just need to set a goal that you're gonna put out X amount of videos. And so I ended up doing that. And even though none of those videos took off, I did it. Right. And then that, basically has allowed us to transition from, all of those videos back then to now basically a podcast. But if you don't have people that give you that slap in the face, hard reality check, sometimes you're not able to see past your own, your own self-awareness limiting beliefs.
I've never once thought to myself, I'm really glad I waited for the perfect time to start. Ever. Every single good thing that's come in my life came from overcoming that initial fear of looking stupid.
Yep.
Where you just assume that everyone that you've ever met in your entire life is waiting for you to hit publish on that first YouTube video. So you delay it because it's like, it's got to be perfect, got to be ready. We talked about this at the beginning. But the truth is you hit publish on that first one and no one saw it. And you got reps and reps and reps, and you're probably 50 videos in at this point, and you feel much better about it. And now you've started, right? You've condensed 10 years of thinking and ruminating on potentially starting a YouTube channel and getting through those initial reps. And now you're just going to keep compounding that, where if you had waited another year, you're another year back of compounding. And that's what most people do.
Yeah, that's so true. Right? You will never regret starting sooner. That's just not a thing.
Right.
It's always, why did I not start sooner? So.
And I'm always thinking about that. What am I not starting right now that 5 years in the future me regrets?
Yes.
And that's kind of a reflection I like to do. I don't have the perfect answer for that. One thing I have recently started doing is making sure that at the end of every day, I write down one small memory from the day. Because I know in 5 years, I'm going to want to be able to look back on that list of things. And so just create a little form in my phone. Last thing I do every night is like, what's one little memory from the day? So in 5 years, I'm going to be able to look back of like, there it is. There's the whole journey. Just little tidbits to like restrike those memories.
And I think that's just one of the most awesome things to look at when you document online too. Is like what you said, Joe Rogan, you go back to his very first episode, you'll see it.
Right.
And just being able to see that alone is just so motivational.
You asked earlier, what were some of those mindset shifts of what helped me get over the beginning? And whenever I was putting in those initial shitty Twitter threads that weren't well formatted, didn't go viral, no one read, in my head, I said, I'm going to look back on these and laugh. This is all part of the story. Your first 20 YouTube videos that probably weren't as good as the ones you're making now, you're going to look back on and show people, right? So that's how I've reframed those beginner reps of, there's nothing perfect about these. I'm just writing the story of when I'm much better, I can point other people back to these. And that's, again, been pretty freeing on the creation side.
So in terms of business, right? Where would you say your number one focus is right now for the quarter?
For the quarter, we are looking to have a fully set foundation to begin scaling our ghostwriting business. And then at that point, we will then turn our attention back to top of funnel content. I think we've understood that in the last year, Ship30 has been built purely on the back of Twitter organic, and that's worked great.
Between both of your guys' organic followings. Okay.
At this point, we want to have a new offer that allows us to better monetize that attention that we know how to generate at this point. We have the beginner course, which is Ship30. That's great. People love it. They tell their friends. Most of our new students come from referrals at this point, such that we barely created any content in the first quarter, and we still had just as successful of a cohort as we had in the past. That's like our signal of, okay, we're doing something right.
Amazing.
And then once we have kind of the higher ticket coaching, we know that we are hitting all the different parts. We can go back to just purely focused on creation. And that sounds like a lot of fun to start YouTube, to start LinkedIn a little bit more, to start Instagram, other places where we know how to kind of play that game once we start to turn it on. Or I think a lot of people go wrong is they go, I'm going to go build a huge following and then I'm going to figure out how to monetize. And then you're selling like Athletic Greens sponsorships, like that I don't want to do at all. It's so much better to be selling your own product.
Yes.
And so I'd rather get that product done now that because we have enough validation that it's going to work, then go back to content, delaying that big audience building kind of spike that we could have on these other platforms. And if we can put those pieces in place, we're going to be sitting in a pretty good spot by the end of the year.
Yeah. Got it.
How about you?
Yeah, for Q2, the big thing for us this quarter is number one is getting our second offer, the Futures Education course, really launched and scaled up essentially. So it's already launched. We're running ad traffic to it, $1,000 a day. But for us, it's getting it to the point where the numbers make sense, where, okay, we can really scale this. So by the end of Q2, we have that proven out. The KPIs and metrics are the same or relatively the same to our first funnel and product and offer. Mm-hmm. That will give us the green light. Hey, at that point, it's really just hiring more people on the sales team, making sure we have very good fulfillment. Everyone comes in, gets white glove onboarding, making sure people get results, making sure the experience is great. And it's just, at that point, it's a system. So
can I geek out on those numbers with you for a sec?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Futures ads run to VSL or to VSL. Yep. And then it's VSL to survey to book a call to call, and then conversion on the call.
Yep.
And that's, you're just looking at pure numbers across the board, cost per book lead, conversion, et cetera. And once you kind of get comfortable with those numbers, when you think about testing that, what are the different things you're testing? Is it the VSL? Is it the offer itself? Is it the ad creative? Like, what levers are you pulling where it's like, okay, I want to improve, and I guess to make it even more tactical, which of those numbers do you want to improve the most now, and what kind of tests are you running on those numbers?
Yeah. So now the final thing for us to dial in now is just the close rate. But we launched this funnel 3 months ago, and at first it was the landing page and so it's important to have rough ideas of what good KPIs are in your funnel, because that's going to allow you to diagnose the root cause and tell you what you need to fix. So obviously when we first launched, there are multiple things that were not in KPI, but you can't solve for everything at once. You need to do it one by one, right? And so this is where a lot of people fail, because they don't push past that initial inefficient spend, because you're just burning money. But you have to burn money to get data, right? So we had to spend money. First thing we fixed was our landing page, right? The next time around when we were spending money, landing page worked, but there are now other metrics that were not solved. So then the next thing after that, VSL, right? And usually I would say the VSL, if I had to choose one thing in the whole funnel, the VSL is the toughest to crack.
Yeah.
But if you
toughest to test too, because the amount of effort that goes into creating each one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Pareto principle, that is the number one. Like, that's where someone should be spending 90% of their time, is really getting good at VSLs and testing that. Because once you solve that, because the landing page, we knew that we could in one go basically get it to work. So that's why we did that first.
So the landing page doesn't have a VSL. Landing page is the opt-in.
Opt-in.
And what is the opt-in? Hey, watch this VSL training that's going to help you do X, Y, Z.
Exactly. So it's watch this training, but we give a hint of like, hey, here's why this Wall Street secret market is the best one to trade. Right. So, and obviously for us.
So it's not it's an indirect VSL in terms of you're educating them and then saying, hey, if you want to learn more about this, we can help.
Correct.
Got it.
So indirect VSL path, VSL. But again, VSL I'd say is the toughest to crack, right?
How do you test that? Is it call booking rate after watching?
Yes. So there's different ways to look at the VSL, but depending on whatever software you use that you import your VSL in, whether it's Wistia, Vimeo, I think there's another one as well, Vidyard. Yeah. You can look at the analytics. So you want to look at it just as you would look at like a YouTube video. Where are people dropping off, right? What's the engagement rate? What % of people who watch the VSL get to the booking? Because if you don't even get enough people to the booking, and there's like different drop-offs in there, that's going to tell you at least first where you should start to adjust your VSL, right? So that's the VSL analytics will tell you where to adjust. And again, the VSL is tough. You will have to put out, if it's my first VSL, it took us 7 VSLs before we got to work.
And how long would it take to produce and write and script and
Everything?
test one? Yeah.
Once you have the initial foundation, and you should model your initial foundation off of a working VSL, right? There's a lot of people who have working VSLs. So you want to do that because you reduce the variables. Once you do that, then at that point, you can look at a VSL almost like a script, right? Or different parts of a movie, right? There's only like 5 or 6 different plays or parts to a VSL. So depending on your drop-off rate, you can choose which one to focus on at the same time.
And then do you split traffic to different VSLs and look at the watch rate and the book call rate on those? Or is it just you switch the VSL and you knew what the old one was, so you look at the new one and then
you can do that. For us, we just switch it out because especially on a new offer, I would say that might make more sense if you already have an existing,
because you have control that works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for us, it didn't work, and we got enough data from that first one where it didn't work. So it's more so we're throwing stuff at the wall.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, we've never done any kind of VSL.
Yeah, so VSL is tough. Like that's the one I would prep for, where it will take you guys longer to figure out. So
yeah, with our ghostwriting, we sent one email with an application form and got 1,200 applications.
All from our existing email list.
Wow. So we ran a beta cohort where we took 45 sales calls in 2 days and closed 33. So it was like validated offer, validated, warm, people who trusted us. We have a cool, different offer.
Wow.
And so it's like...
And this is for a high ticket price point.
Yeah. So we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of VSLs just yet. I think it's
that's good.
We just need to be able to scale the fulfillment and deliver on the product and feel really good. So we held a beta cohort with 30 people and held one-on-one interviews with all of them to figure out what could be improved. Now we're going to relaunch it again in May. And like, the worst thing you can do is, if we had 1,200 people who wanted to join, is let all 1,200 of them in. So we were very selective about who we let in the first one. We're going to be very selective about who we let in on the second one. And until we're like super comfortable with the entire product itself, then we'll go and let more people in. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they say, got a new offer, I'll take anyone who's got a credit card and let them in.
Yeah.
And that's going to compound against you, because they're not going to see results. They're not going to share testimonials.
Yeah.
We want to create such a great product where everyone who joins tells 5 friends. Yeah. And then the marketing kind of compounds in our favor, rather than, I think, people who have poor products, all you're doing is marketing more. And then that's working against you in the long run.
100%. And I think that's why it's so tough to crack VSLs, especially when you don't have an existing audience or offer, right? For you guys, that's your journey will be a lot easier than mine, because I started it with not as much social proof as you guys. And so like your sales calls alone, like those 45 sales calls you did, that alone, you'll find the same patterns that you can use for the VSL. What are the pain points that people have in terms of, why they're interested in this?
Interesting.
So
yeah, most of those sales calls were like, I just really want to join. Can you tell me how much it is? And so like we were doing the pitch and stuff, but at the end of the day, it was just like, I just have to know whether or not I can pay for this.
Yes.
And that's the benefit of organic traffic.
Yes.
Is we put out so much free content that's valuable that people go, if this is what you're giving away for free, you're going to coach me live twice a week for 8 weeks. Of course I'm going to do this, you know? And so I think that's the big advantage of organic.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's, we were talking about this earlier. You started with organic, and now, paid or building the funnel route. We started off paid, but now we're really going hard on organic. So
have you thought about creating educational content on Twitter? I think you guys would crush on that.
Yeah. So I think that's where we need to go, because I know trading is pretty big as well on Twitter. So I think that's...
And most people don't educate on it. They just say like what's working, rather than teaching. Like, we could workshop 100 different things that And this is something we're thinking about when you talked about B2B. It's like, how can we go to people who have an education product, have all the content sitting somewhere, they just don't know how to package it up and put it out in an organic way on a written platform?
Yep.
Because the opt-in rate at the bottom of a hyper valuable Twitter thread on how to swing trade futures markets in the, softs space is, to the right person, is going to be huge, rather than trying to run all this traffic to a VSL that they don't necessarily trust you. Like, if you can educate someone and then ask them to opt in versus just put the offer in front of their face, I think that that's where a lot of people are trending. And so if we can help, this is a ghostwriter that we know who loves trading would go to you and say, hey, I'll go through all your course content and create 6 months of Twitter content.
Yep.
You'd pay right away for that.
Yes.
If it was like, if they did a good job with it, because you don't have to think about that. It all gets done. And
there's a system for it. They're putting out, we know they're going to be putting out X amount of content per week. So.
And that's like 4 days of ad spend that you could pay instead to a writer who's going to give you organic content for a full month.
Yes.
Yes. So different ways of thinking, but we could talk about that more. I think more people are going to recognize the power of educational organic content.
100%.
And then sell the implementation.
100%. I guess some final questions is what excites you most right now in life?
Man, the fact that I'm living the life that I would have dreamed to have lived 4 years ago. I get to wake up, I get to write with no distractions, I get to work out, I get to cook all my own meals, high quality stuff. I get to do interviews like this. I get to live in what I think is the best city in the country to live. I get to work on a business where I have creative control. I get to work with an all-star team. I get to work out. I get to go to sleep. And I get to hang out with anyone I want, as much as I want or as little as I want. That's kind of where it just feels good. And
life on your own
life
terms.
is good. Life is good right now. And it's easy to get to a stage of improvement like this. And because you've been in that slog for so long, you still don't recognize the amount of progress that you've potentially made. So I try to zoom out and be like, dude, 5 years ago, you were 280 pounds, drinking 30 beers a week, working on Wall Street under fluorescent lights for 12 hours.
Yeah.
Anything that I'm doing today is far more exciting than that. And so I'm always just kind of trying to radiate gratitude of, I get to have a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. So pretty much every day is exciting.
Yeah. That's a grateful, gratitude, like reality check to constantly keep you grounded. So that's amazing.
Exactly. If I can look back on what am I doing today that I would have begged to have been able to do, that's pretty much my whole day.
Yeah. What scares you the most right now?
I think, what am I doing incorrectly, or what am I not doing that I'm regretting in 5 years, 10 years? What are my blind spots? I think that's what scares me the most. I think I'm on a path that I should be on, and I can project and feel pretty confident about where I'm headed. But I'm always a little bit like, where am I doing things that I may not necessarily see the negative results of until it's too late? So here's an example, right? You look at someone who's very overweight. They have a visible manifestation of all the choices they've made on the health and fitness side for the last 10 years, right? They're overweight. There are a lot of things in life that I think that don't necessarily have that visible manifestation. Like, you can't see the result of doing the wrong thing for a long period of time. And I think a lot of that's probably internal, like self-talk, and maybe some habits that don't necessarily compound physically, but could be compounding mentally. So that, I think, is what scares me, is where am I doing things that are compounding against me that I don't see the results of right now, but I'll see in 5, 10, 15 years. I don't have a good answer, but that's the kind of thought exercise that freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah. It's we've been talking about that on this podcast a few times. Definitely something I'm gonna do after this talk is sit down, write down where I want to be 5 years from now, and make sure the things where I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is what's gonna get me there.
And it's hard because I don't think I know where that is. If you'd have told me 3 years ago that I'd be running a multi-million-dollar education business in the writing niche, I'd thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, can I project 3 to 5 years? Kinda.
Yeah.
But I think I'm on the right path, and for the most part, I'll stay on that path. But again, you just don't know.
Yeah. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Start writing on the internet. So I didn't start until I was 24. 24, yeah. I would do anything to have been documenting my college football and school journey when I was in college. I think at the time I was watching YouTubers and reading people's blogs, and they were all putting their ideas out there. But I was so terrified that everyone I knew would just make fun of me if I was putting ideas out there. Truth is, they were all way too busy thinking about themselves. And that's a good lesson for any beginner, is the people that you think are going to judge you are way too consumed in their day-to-day life to care what you're doing.
Yep.
So my 21-year-old self would be stop drinking and start writing. Like those two things alone. If I'd have started 3 years earlier than I have recently, I think I'd be at an even better place than I am right now.
Amazing. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the podcast. So appreciate you for coming on, Dickie.
Dude, this was a lot of fun. And I think we'll have to do this again, especially
For sure.
with this.
We're
place.
definitely going to have to do this a lot.
I got 1,000 questions about how you set up this epic studio. So yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Juan is your go-to guy for that.
There you go. Awesome.